Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Sunday night video. This week I am covering the story of Dolly Peel, or at least some of her life story and a few other little bits about her and her statue in South Shields. I hope you will enjoy it and find it interesting. But before we begin, can I just say, if you do enjoy this video, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. Thank you. And I would just like to say that it is completely free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money, but it does help to support the channel. And I would just like to add, as I always do now, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify. So I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. Dolly was born Dorothy Appleby in around 1782 in South Shields to parents Bernard and Anne. Her date of birth is possibly not 100% confirmed. Dates back in the 1700s are quite hard to completely pin down, as often people didn't keep records of births and deaths, etc., and sometimes they did just randomly guess their own age and date of birth. So the 1782 date has also been suggested as 1784. And it's also possible that Dolly, or Dorothy as she would have been then, was one of at least 6 children. Dolly married Cuthbert Peel in around 1803, and the couple would go on to have at least 6 children together, possibly more. They lived in Shadwell Street, and this is now known as Wapping Street, and it's not all that far away from where the Dolly Peel statue stands today. Cuthbert was a fisherman and Dolly was what most would know as a fishwife, selling fish from her basket, most likely going from door to door in search of someone to buy her goods. But it seems that this was not all that Dolly would sell. She was also someone who was able to get her hands on a variety of other items, such as brandy, lace, tobacco and perfume. She was in fact a bit of a smuggler. Her life would not have been an easy one, and no doubt the extra money from selling these items would have helped a lot to support her family. And she was quite good at her job and did build a bit of a reputation for herself in her hometown of South Shields. But something she was probably more famous for were her run-ins with the press gangs. She was said to have saved many a man from being sent to sea. And the stories that have been repeated over the years suggest that she would hide the men under her petticoats of her skirt, and that once the press gang had moved on, the man she was hiding would then be able to escape. Press gangs were used to recruit men for the Navy, especially during wartime, and this was often done by means of capturing men when they were a little under the influence of drink, and it often involved knocking them out when they weren't looking, and then taking them on board ship, and by the time the men woke up, they were frequently out at sea with no means of escape, so stuck doing the job whether they liked it or not. Dolly's husband had been on board the HMS Amelia in around 1808, and it was said that he had been press ganged into that job. HMS Amelia saw a lot of action during the Napoleonic War, and sometime in 1811, or possibly sooner, as one of Dolly's children was possibly born in 1811, Cuthbert was able to get off the ship and return home, and it does seem that he may have deserted. Until March of 1812, no one bothered the family, and they simply got on with their everyday lives in Shadwell Street in South Shields. However, another war had started, and the press gangs were coming back and were keen, it seems, to get Dolly's husband back on board ship. And rumour has it that when they came into South Shields, Cuthbert had managed to get away from the seafront and was heading in the direction of his home, with the press gang following him. And on reaching his home, it is said that Dolly was able to distract the men while Cuthbert made his escape out of the window of their home. However, he did not get far, and he was quickly captured, allegedly along with their son Ralph, and both men were placed on board the HMS Lyra. I have only seen a couple of accounts of the story where the son Ralph is mentioned, and I have said allegedly, because in most cases those press ganged were normally between the ages of 18 and 55. And seeing as Dolly and Cuthbert had only married in 1803, at best their oldest child would have only been 9 years old in 1812. So I am not entirely sure that that part of the story is correct. Perhaps Ralph was a relative but not the son of Dolly and Cuthbert. After Cuthbert was captured, it is said that Dolly snuck on board the ship and was not found for several days. But once she was found, it was too late to return her to the UK, so she was put to work in the sick bay, tending to the wounded sailors. Now, life at sea must have been very hard. Many battles would have been fought and many men would have been injured. So it has to be hoped that Dolly wasn't alone trying to look after them. However, she was seen as someone who was very good at the job, and many described her as being very brave, coping with the no doubt awful conditions that she found herself in. After the defeat of Napoleon and the end of the Napoleonic War, the Peels were finally able to return home to Shadwell Street in South Shields, and here they would continue with their earlier life, having 3 more children. And after this, Dolly was known as a great storyteller and also a writer of poetry. And she was also said to have helped the poor of the town whenever she could, and she was a well-known figure at the marketplace in South Shields. Dolly's husband Cuthbert died in 1856 and Dolly herself died in 1857 after a bad bout of bronchitis, and she was said to be around 75 years old at the time of her death. Sadly, I have not been able to find any details of where Dolly and her husband were buried, so if anybody knows or has any ideas about this, do please let me know in the comments below. If the tales of Dolly's life truly are true, then it is safe to say that she had had a very tough life, but without a doubt a very interesting one too, and I can understand why she would have been a much loved character in South Shields. Over the years, many articles would appear in the local papers about the life of Dolly Peel, and some of the stories were said to be exaggerated, but some that were told closer to the time of her death may well have been much closer to the truth. And this one appeared in the papers in 1888 from an unnamed source. And the person said he had known Dolly Peel well when he was a boy, and he basically said, "She used to sell fish, but also other things that were more profitable. She was a well-known smuggler. She was a local celebrity and could tell a story well, and I have heard her tell many. Had she been an educated woman, she would have been very clever. She composed a song about the Russian vessel that ran aground in South Shields one winter with a cargo of tallow. The people of the town were able to raid the ship as there was no one to stop them, and that winter was not as harsh as it could have been for many. And it was Dolly who made people think the ship had been there to help them, and it was something that was talked about in the town for many years to come. She was a great reader, and she gave me my first ever novel to read, which was called Fatherless Fanny, and I thought it was a great treat to hear the stories that Dolly told." Later, in 1936, another story appeared discussing the idea that when Dolly was trying to save her husband from the press gang, that she had somehow managed to put one of the press gang men on the ground, and then placed the post tub on top of him and sat on it until her husband was able to escape. Now, I'm not sure if that was a true story, but you never know. But it did make me smile, though, at the thought of this tiny little woman knocking out one of the press gang. In 1986, Reg Peel, who was the great-great-great-great-grandson of Dolly Peel, was in the local papers discussing the statue he had commissioned of Dolly based on a surviving photo that was said to be of Dolly that had possibly been taken in around 1850. But I did recently see a Facebook post where someone was suggesting that the photo didn't quite look right, but I am certainly not going to say whether I believe it's right or not, but I do think it definitely represents how Dolly might have looked at the time. The statue in question was created by Bill Gofton, and in 1986 it was standing in his own garden until a suitable site for the statue was agreed upon. And it was said at the time that a location was being discussed and hopefully the statue would be on display soon. And by April of 1987, a location was agreed upon and the statue was unveiled by Councillor Gladys Hobson, and of course Reg Peel was present too. It seems that at the time there was a little bit of an issue though, as the council had added a plaque with some details of Dolly's life, and they had listed her date of birth as 1784, but Reg was pretty sure it was 1782. But as I said earlier in the video, it's often very difficult to 100% confirm the date of birth for people from this era, so either of the dates could have been right. In 1995, Dolly made the news again, though sadly this time not for good reasons. It seems that overnight, Dolly, the statue, had been covered in pink paint, and the empty pot had been placed on her head. Apparently, an insulting caption had also been painted over the plaque below the statue. Now, many in the area thought it had been done by people from the local pub when they'd been drunk and not thinking what they were doing. But I never found an article that followed up this story, so I don't know if anyone was ever caught for the paint attack, but the statue was later cleaned up and repaired. And I can't even begin to imagine what Dolly might have done to those responsible if she had still been around in real life. And finally, I just wanted to add that a pub in the area, the Dolly Peel, was indeed named after the famous lady herself. Still open today, it was said that the pub had many items of memorabilia in it connected to Dolly. But I don't know if this is still the case today, so if you do live in the area and maybe go to this pub and know the answer to that question, then do please let me know in the comments below. I do hope you have enjoyed this brief little history of the life of Dolly Peel and some of the tales about her from after her death. I do hope that you have also found it interesting. I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.